in Ireland, and I think you said you just booked your flight.
I just booked my flight for Davidson, North Carolina. I'm looking forward to CXR Operations Community Meeting. I found a direct flight from Dublin. Who would have thought there's a direct flight from Dublin to Charlotte? Like, there is. I found it.
I'm not entirely sure. I got a direct flight out of Austin.
Yeah.
Well,
There's
there
just
is
a lot of Irish people in Charlotte. Maybe that's it.
Yeah, we just like to get around. That's probably it, you know.
That's it.
When you live in a damp island that's kind of cold and miserable all year round, you will create routes anywhere in the world. Like, trust me, you will get the hell out. That is our survival instinct, Gerry.
I think it's great.
Oh my gosh! Well, there's a lot of travel coming up. I think around the corner, right? We've got right around the corner. We've got Unleash in a couple of weeks. It feels like it's next week. I keep having a minor panic attack of like, is my room booked? Is my stuff ready? Is my panel prepared? Is my, that anxiety I haven't had for a conference in 3 years, maybe. Yeah,
it's going to be fun.
Yeah,
it will be fun. Mark does a great job with that. I love the event.
He does a great job. Yeah, Unleash is great, and it's Vegas. People like going to Vegas, right? And you get good speakers. Like, I go for the content as much as the networking. When it comes to Unleash, we did Unleash in Paris only last fall. I think it was October time, and it's brilliant. Like there was fantastic speakers. They had Erin Meyer was on stage again. She was back the first time in 3 or 4 years, talking about her new book that she wrote with Reed Hastings, which was really awesome. The kind of no rules. She was a standout kind of keynote for me. But like, it was packed with good content for 2 days.
He breaks it up nicely.
Yeah,
he does. Yeah, he does.
He really does. It is probably rapidly becoming my preferred. Like, if I have to rank them, right? And I'm not outing anybody as one I wouldn't go to anymore, that kind of thing. So it's not a severe who's in, who's out ranking. But like, I would put the work that Mark and that team does really right up there at the top from a content, from an experience standpoint. I love the startup work that they do and the show. Gerry, you're helping, I think, this year judge the finalists.
Yeah. And it's a very interesting group as well. It's a very interesting group of judges too. But other than that, we're good.
Yeah. All right. Well, we do have a couple of things we want to talk about. Some work you guys have done. I think, Johnny, you got some new stuff going on over there. So are you guys ready to jump in?
Sure.
Okay, here we go.
Welcome to the CXR channel, our premier podcast for talent acquisition and talent management. Listen in as the CXR community discusses a wide range of topics focused on attracting, engaging, and retaining the best talent. We're glad you're here.
Okay, it's good to be back on the air. We are recording, but we are streaming as well. We're gonna push this out. It goes obviously to all the channels where we typically stream. You'll see this live on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on YouTube, of course, cxr.works/podcast, where you can listen to this one, obviously, and subscribe so that you can know what's coming up in advance. We've got all the next stuff coming up. I want to remind everybody as well that we've got a lot of stuff going on. We're getting back, as you heard, sort of as we were jumping in the line, we've got a lot of stuff coming up front. So if you'll check out cxr.works/events, and that is where we are actually sharing activities, events, conferences, that sort of thing, where Gerry and I will be. And then, of course, where some of our members will be as well. We were talking about Unleash, which is just around the corner. And of course, we mentioned we've got a CXR meeting coming up for operations, where we're going to be at Train Technologies, and we're pretty excited about that. I'll go ahead and welcome Gerry in from the green room. Mr. Crispin, how are you today?
Wonderful. And, I don't know if we have an events, our trip that Barb and I are going on to Israel.
We don't. I don't think it's actually on the calendar, the trip. Yeah, there's a lot going on in Israel. It makes me nervous every time you're trying to go, but that's fine.
I'm getting calls from folks going, have you been watching the news lately? And I'm going, there's something going on in that part of the world all the time.
It's fine. You survived Burning Man 3 times. You can make it in and out of Tel Aviv.
I think I can do it.
You'll be fine. Well, let's welcome in our guest today. Back to the show, Mr. Campbell. How are you?
Gentlemen, good to be here. It's funny, Gerry, you talk about Tel Aviv. I remember I was over there a good few years ago with our friend Kev Blair when he was heading up Cisco's TA team. And I was nervous. I was like, oh gosh, Tel Aviv going into Israel, what's going to be like? And I came back like just joyously sharing with my wife about this new Mediterranean resort I discovered. You know, I was like, oh, it's like not like that at all. It's really beautiful with gorgeous restaurants, great people. You're on the Med. It's fantastic. The weather's great. Everyone's hospitable until you go to the airport to go home, of course. But you know, I just thought it was fabulous. And it reminded me when I was a kid growing up in Ireland, and people would talk about, oh, like, you know, what's it like there? They're like, what do you mean? It's like, well, with the bombs and stuff. We're like, oh no, that's like that's over there in that part, and it's like that happens. Like, what's the problem?
Around the corner.
Yeah, it's like that's like an hour away. What are you talking about? You know, it's like
you're reminding me, Johnny, of the I know it was Scotsman, but you're reminding me of the routine that Robin Williams did when you're like, oh no, it's way over there. It's like, oh, we'll put a little flag to give him hope. Oh no.
Oh yeah, slag the Irishman with the Scottish accent. Come on.
Yeah.
Guys, let's throw it here. I got a leprechaun costume there you want to put on, Chris?
So for those maybe, Johnny, who don't know you, why don't you give us sort of an escalator pitch? Like give us a quick rundown on who you are and why we should be interested in what you have to say today.
And I want to know why it's an escalator, not an elevator pitch. But who am I? Former recruiter, father of 4 boys, wife to Jill. Live in Ireland, used to work in the Caribbean in recruiting, set up a recruiting staffing agency 15 years ago, pivoted that into a training business, which became Social Talent, which became the world's largest online platform for talent skills. And that's what we do today. We work with big organizations around the world and small ones to teach their teams how to hire talent, how to lead talent, how to engage talent. And we've got hundreds of hours of courses and content that we push out every week. And we educate the world on what the future of talent looks like.
I will say, hands down, we have 2 solutions providers that our members consistently talk just glowingly about. And Johnny, the Social Talent Crew and the work that you guys do within that learning platform is one of them. Like consistently, we've never heard a disparaging word. I mean, it has always come back that, oh my gosh, we use that. We love it. We've seen Gerry's content in there. John Vlastelica's got some content. Like we just love what's going on in there. And I think you guys are just crushing it.
Thank you. And it's the people in the platform, right? I used to be a presenter. I'm not a presenter anymore on the platform because there's better people than me out there who do better work teaching on a wider range of topics. So yeah, it's exciting. There's about 100 people who deliver content on the platform today, and they're brilliant. And I watch my social talent training every week. I was doing training on how to be a better leader only at lunchtime, my time this afternoon. I got my 30 minutes training in. So it's nice to actually be a user of the platform because it's not looking at me. It's new people who have new ideas who teach me stuff. It's great. It's a pleasure.
Oh, that's fun. I love that. I got to ask, I saw Gerry's face. So Gerry, I'm mind reading. So you tell me if I'm off. Has there been any thought around the impact or speculation around the impact to all of this ChatGPT and Bard technology for your platform specifically? I mean, I trust you're not going to launch anything that says now with ChatGPT baked in, but there's got to be some sort of even ancillary, some sort of impact or disruptor aspect to that. Yeah.
So it's funny. I kind of go back 7 or 8 years when someone in our engineering team said, we need to find a use for AI. And I was like, what? Everyone has it. We need to put it on a website and find a use for it. Put AI into the box. And I was like, okay, let's go find a use for it. And what I learned then is what I still apply today is you don't go find a use for ChatGPT. And people have said this to me. You put it in our system today. It's like, you got to find problems that your customers have and you got to find solutions. And if this happens to be a really good solution to a genuine problem, go for it. You know, absolutely. Yeah. Don't go trying to find a problem for this solution. It's just the wrong way around. So I think it will change learning, right? I think HR is one of the areas that's going to be changed the first with this technology, right? There's a load of admin that I think will take office. In learning, one of the areas that's being touted as being the kind of future is that we don't need presenters anymore, right? Because you can connect it all up and you can have, well, you need a presenter for 60 seconds. So we just captured Gerry for 60 seconds saying a few words, and then we can make any course in the world with Gerry, right? Yeah. And you know what? I think you're going to see half the world's training in 3 years will look like that, right? But you could do that with a movie. I don't think you're going to see half the movies in the cinema, in the theaters like that. You're going to see really high quality people. In fact, you're going to see, I think, a bigger difference in quality, because at the moment, a lot of the stuff that people do, actors and professionals are paid to do in training, is crap. And it would be just as good having AI do it, right? Or
Yeah.
ChatGPT produce it. So what it means is that if all that average crap gets replaced by automated people, which I think it will, it means the stuff that's not automated needs to be that much better. So to
Yeah.
me, that's what excites me. It's like, this means that the premium stuff has got to be so good. That's when I look at it, I go, I need to make sure that we are at the very, very best. Because if you're not using an automated speaker, she or he or they need to be fantastic.
So I just had a really similar discussion with somebody the other day where I would agree with you completely. I think it's not AI versus people, it's people versus people. And it's with, like, some people are going to elevate their game, and others are just going to get lazy and are going to find it to be more of a challenge.
You know what I thought of when you were talking, Johnny, is I have a cousin who's a real quality musician. But a couple of years ago, he bought a product so that when he speaks into the microphone, it adjusts his tone quality of voice,
Like auto-tune.
to different kind of modalities that just improve what he can offer. So he can fake Elvis Presley a little bit differently than he would have had he played an Elvis Presley tune prior to that. And I'm thinking, and so when you were talking about that improvement in quality, yeah, you have to have the knowledge and the skill to begin with, but once you are applying those tools, you can kind of upskill the whole approach in terms of the result. That's interesting.
I love that knowledge, right? Could you imagine Leonard Cohen using auto-tune, right? If you're still around with us today, right? But just know, because it's the distinctiveness that makes him fantastic, right? I remember I was watching Edge from U2. The Edge was talking about technology and its usage, right? And he was saying how he basically every day he'd have a new guitar riff, and he records it and samples it, puts it into his laptop, and then he goes back to this vast database of samples and he puts them together. And a tune would come out of that. And then he'd play it straight through in real time and record that. And you see how someone gets augmented with technology. Rather than trying to remember all the tunes back in the 80s, 90s, you have to remember his tunes. What was that tune I wrote in the hotel room 16 weeks ago? He can just go to his laptop and there it is, that 3-second riff or whatever. So I think it's the augmentation and how you then become better, because you're outsourcing things like memory to a technology.
Yeah, but here's what I would like if somebody is covering Leonard Cohen, if somebody is covering someone else because they have the tools to say, I do it this way, then Leonard should get a penny or two for the use of covering with him, if you will. And that could change the game from an income point of view for some of those folks too.
Well, I just watched Ben Affleck's Air movie last night.
It's good.
It's awesome, right? Really loved it. But I hadn't realized how, to your point, Gerry, that contract that Nike signed with Michael Jordan was the first that gave the athletes a cut of the revenue. And it begun, and Sonny, the guy that Matt Damon portrays, became somebody who was highly influential in facilitating and won a massive Supreme Court case in the U.S. that allowed college kids to get access to income, and created billions of dollars of wealth for the athletes that they never would have had, that the corporates would have maintained. So you look at that kind of redistribution. That's a lot of folks, they talk about Web 3.0. What is Web 3.0? A lot of it's about where the money moves. Web 2.0, it all went to the social networks. And it's saying Web 3.0 is more about it's going to the creators. It's following that trend. Sports in the 80s and 90s, the internet now in the 20s and 30s. Maybe it's just about where the wealth goes.
Yeah, there's an interesting. So when you started talking about the GPT, when you started responding to that question, John, you said something that sort of struck a nerve with me, and that was, go find a way to use this. And we had a discussion the other day with a few leaders who were talking about technology and wanting to jump on technology before they've even got a challenge for it, or leaders who shop for tech that's supposed to answer challenges or problems they don't even know that they have yet. So it is kind of an interesting like chasing that shiny bauble challenge that spans across all the industries. But I think to your point, like there are opportunities that will present themselves the more we sort of adopt or the more that we use this.
Yeah, I remember a TA leader, I won't name him, that I respect massively. He got a great job working for a kind of moonshot arm of a big telco. And he was telling me about his job about 4 or 5 years ago when he joined. And he's saying that, they got promoted and bonused on the amount of experiments they ran and not the amount of outcomes or successes. It was like, didn't matter if you had, 20 failures. It was like you tried 20 times. So that was the main thing. They did these, and they were really proud of this, as were all the X and moonshot arms of most of the tech companies were all about this. And you kind of look back now, right? They've all been shut down. Right? That approach is done for 2023. It's not, that doesn't work. And it reminded me, I listened to a podcast about a founder of a business who was talking about in 1998 and into the early 90s when he founded his business. It was all about views, the dot-com bubble that we all went through in 2000, right? That was all about views. So all the different pages, there was no revenue, right? It was just views. You were worth it if you had views, right? I think he sold his business for 200 million, and they had at that time got $35,000 of revenue in total ever, right? But they had views, and they sold it for 200 million, right? And this was back in 1999, and we went from like views to fast, like 3-4 years ago, it was all about revenue growth, right? Multiples of revenue is about who got the biggest revenue growth, and then we finally arrived at profit. It's like we've gone from, in 25 years, we've gone from views being the big thing to no, revenue's the big thing to finally, no, actually it's profit. And I look at those kind of things when you talk about tech, it's like, oh, it's about using tech, it's about using AI. It all eventually gets to what's the fucking purpose, right? What's the purpose? Sorry for cursing. What the purpose of all these companies, views have to convert to revenue, which has to convert to profit. Tech has to convert to solving a problem that actually somebody has that's worth solving. Yeah. And using it for the sake of it, I never subscribe to that. Never subscribe to it.
Yeah. I mean, it reminds me, it's two things. It reminds me of a conversation that we were part of where we had a vendor that was talking to a TA leader and just continuing to sort of talk about what they offered and how they could help. And the TA leader said, yeah, but I don't have those problems. Like, I love your product, but those aren't my problems. Those might be her problems or his problems, but those aren't mine. So this doesn't really work for me.
I still talk, like, don't get me wrong. You might have come across a social talent salesperson who made this mistake, right? I talked to some of our team about, you're a pharmacy and you're going and going, hey, Gerry, so we got stuff to solve the headaches. We've got some stuff for, for infections, for bruises. And you're kind of going, yeah, it's great. I have none of these things, and a doctor doesn't do that. A physician will say, how are you feeling? What's wrong? And then you'll eventually get to the one thing that they sell that you need. That's critical because that's the thing you have pain in. And discovery is really, really important in this. But I think, I used to meet folks in our space, technology vendors, and they'd have solutions. Like, you remember, there was loads of stuff going on in the early 10s that were around discovery of candidates and social media and so on. And a lot of the tools are built by software engineers, no disrespect to them, who never worked in our industry, who never worked as a practitioner, and who never worked with us. They just knew how to build code. You're like, I can build the best, marketplace for whatever. You're like, great, but do you have any talents there? No. Do you have any buyers there? No. What the hell's the point? And do you know the pain? And I think the best solutions come from pain. Someone who's experienced, like when we set up social talent, right? I started teaching people how to use social media, not because I wanted to make money, because I was a recruiter who was trying to get a fee in the world's worst recession we'd ever seen. So I was like, does this work to get me candidates better than everything else? And only because I found a way to make it work and then taught people that did it work. I wasn't just trying to find something to flog. It was like, I had a real pain. I need talent for weird roles around the world, because only weird roles got you a fee back in 08, 09. And therefore, these new tools helped me do that. And people went, show me how to do that, right? So from real, genuine pain, you actually develop great solutions. So you got to marry that pain to the solution.
So pain is the mother of solutions. Like the necessity is the mother of, I like that.
It is though.
So outside of us predicting the future, you're going to love this segue. This is what 360 episodes gets you, these masterclass segues. Outside of trying to predict the future, we've done a little bit of work on the past. So, So Gerry, you were one of the editors for this huge project. This was a huge project. This was months of work. This is countless hours of research. So I want to let you sort of set the stage for what is the history of recruiting.
Well, it really, I have to give credit to Adela Schoolerman, because she was the one who called me and said, look, I've been a recruiter now for X number of years. I love what I'm doing. And I keep asking myself, where did we come from? and that sparked a whole host of things. And she had been looking at some of the work that Jim Stroud had done and a few others in trying to put pieces of this together. And together, I'm looking at it and going, I'm old enough that I've lived through most of the history of recruiting myself. So I'm kind of surprised when we look at it. And then we basically made a very critical decision, which is to start really around 1900, which is approximately the second industrial revolution, because that was when there was significant movement towards larger scaling how we work together. And in addition to that, there was an intense focus on management in that early stage. So it was primitive, but still, you're looking at how do we orchestrate, how do we organize, what is industrial organizational approaches to how we do these things, and recruiting is a piece of that. Before that, it was pretty ugly how we hired, and I didn't want to get into all of the issues about how we sold our children to mines, so that we could make a little bit of a living. So I think I wanted to start really at a point in which we're really starting to become a modern approach to technology. And so we've got about 250, 300 little milestones, and each one should be a story. And so what I challenged the 40 or 50 contributing authors was to tell me a bit of that story. If you experienced it personally, I'll accept what you state. But if you didn't accept it personally, I want to see some linkages to legitimate support for what that milestone's about. And I got a great response from, I guess it was about 46 that we had. And since we announced, by the way, I've had 3 or 4 give me some additional ones. So over the weekends, I'm going to spend a little time adding those to the history, because I want to see this as something that continues to grow, because there's some big flaws in it. We don't have enough from Europe, for example. I don't know where Ireland starts with all of this. And I'm almost afraid of what they might have been selling or doing in recruiting in 1900, but that's another issue. But we should be adding this from a global point of view, and I'd love to be able to filter by country or by region or those kinds of things, so people could look at it. Yep. And my last point, because I think I'm very passionate about this subject. I believe when you start immersing yourself in the body of knowledge of where we come from, you realize that the story is about our ability to expand the pools of talent to become more diverse and inclusive. That fundamentally, on a global basis, we have restricted work over centuries, if you will, to a much more privileged group. And that the real story about recruiting is how we've opened up, if you will, our ability to hire everyone based on their ability and skill, knowledge, and experience to do the work. We still are on that journey, clearly. It's not an easy one to get over, but the fact of the matter is that it really pops out when you start looking at a lot of these milestones.
Yeah, I'll throw this in too for those who are listening and not watching. The URL is easy to get to it. It's www.cxr.foundation. That is a domain. cxr.foundation/history. It's pretty straightforward. Johnny, you were also part of contributing to some of the content here, yeah?
Yeah, it's been great fun going back through my laptop, my old files, to find out the different images and trying to remember some of the different tech. Now I only got back maybe 20 years, and then there's some just references that I'd use in presentations before I flung to Gerry that maybe a little bit older than that. But yeah, I think it's really important to understand the history of something, because there's a huge amount of learning, right? We tend to make the same mistakes over and over and over and over again. And you don't need to. If you just understand the history, you can understand the mistake that someone else made before you, probably several generations ago, several times over and over again. And you see cycles of human patterns and behaviors, right? And we're in the business of people. So to understand the behavior over even a small period, like 120 years, it's a small period, right? It's important to understand a lot of the basic principles, like, the obvious things on the history of recruiting we see are, the earliest job advertisements. They fundamentally look the same as they do today. They appeal to the same emotive purpose statements that people are trying to train people on in 2023. We're still doing it because it still works, right? Because we haven't changed that much as humans.
Just love me, just work here. I mean, that's the whole spirit.
They actually called in up to the 1940s. They called the job ads in newspapers tombstones. Just so you know, it's why I don't know, but they look like tombstones because they were just text with no embellishment whatsoever. It wasn't until the 1950s that they started examining ways to use different fonts, different kinds of approaches, and kind of marketing those job ads. But and that lasted up until the obviously late 90s, until the internet took over.
Yeah, it's funny. I remember the earliest internet ads. We just took the lineage ads we put in the newspapers,
sure,
and we just put them on the internet.
Yep.
And you don't. Sometimes it takes a long time to change your habit. You move it to a new medium, the technologically more innovative medium, but you don't change fundamentally what you're doing.
Right.
And then you get something like listen, the pandemic. You mentioned, Gerry, the kind of fundamental shift we've gone through in the last few years, right? We had the internet, we had everything else, but we still went to offices and worked 9 to 5, which was a factory-oriented construct that was over 100 years old. But we just kind of copied it because it's what we knew. We applied it to teleworking. And then it took this shock to go, hang on a second, you don't need to do that at all. It's fundamentally different. And we accelerated 50 years. I heard a podcast this morning said that the trajectory would have been 50 more years to get to where we are today, in terms of that innovation, to get to most companies do 2.5 days of work a week, hybrid working on average. And that's 35% of all jobs in the US today. That's such a huge fundamental shift from where it was. But that whole idea, you don't have to be there. You don't have to be there at the same time, and you can work on different things. We got this acceleration, and to your point, Gerry, it does open up opportunity. Like when I was started in this business, my big hope, silly as it was that I wanted a world where anyone could work and compete for any job anywhere in the world, which obviously is impossible was impossible because you can't get work permits. You don't have the right. So, to me, from a privileged economy like Ireland as it is today, why shouldn't someone from an economy that earns less in a very distant place compete for the same job as me? It would mean I'd probably earn less, but they'd earn more and it would be more equal. But politics and economics don't allow for that until the pandemic, when now a company can just open up. And I love the example, I've used it so many times, of Freshie. It was reported about a year ago in Canada when they started using call centers in South America and Southeast Asia to basically serve people in stores, Freshie stores in Quebec and Montreal, from call centers. And you went up to the counter to order your salad, and it was someone in a call center. That's distributing the job around the world and giving equality to so people are going to, oh, it's outsourcing quality Canadian jobs. It was $15 an hour. They couldn't hire anyone in Canada for the goddamn job. And then you get somebody who can get what's considered a premium call center job somewhere else, not a farming job, can now earn, what is in their country great money. That is actually the equalization, to your point, Gerry. It's more equitable.
So I'm a little bit more radical than that. I do believe it's not equalization, because what is a great price in another country still might be much, much less than the value of that work. And I think that there is a baseline that says the value of this work is X. There may be cost of living differences between different countries or different regions, but fundamentally there is a baseline that says this, wherever this is, we should be paying at least this. And the test is, if I'm making $15 an hour doing something that can be remote, and I happen to live in New York, and I decide I want to move to India, but I still can do that job, should I still get $15 an hour if that's the value of that job? And the point is, you should not necessarily be then paying me $15 an hour from India and then paying somebody in India less than that, if in fact that's the value. That's my argument. But I know that right now, most companies, they look for, how do I increase the margin, profit margin, by moving these jobs to different places? But then who gets the money at the end? It's the gal or guy at the top of the ladder whose bonus now increases to millions of dollars. So I'm a little bit more radical in terms of where I think it should go. But I think it's going to take a few more years to get there.
I don't think you're wrong. I think you're spot on, Gerry, but I'd align with that. But what I think a lot of us have come to realize in the last few years is the nuances of making that work, right? I mean, it's complicated, but it's complicated shouldn't be the excuse not to do it. It's just it's more work than just saying, okay.
But Johnny, a thing that's going as fast as that is pay transparency, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So fundamentally, while what I'm saying might be a little bit more radical, the point of where we're going is radical enough in terms of pay transparency. With the Europeans' pay transparency directive almost ready, I see it just going to a new level in terms of how employers are going to have to explain to their employees and to the candidates what it is they're doing in relation to compensation. And we're going to have to upskill on every level, the recruiter, the hiring manager, even the candidates, in terms of better understanding how this works together and how what I'm getting paid is fair. And that's I think, a powerful movement that's been in the works now for almost a decade, but I think has accelerated through the pandemic, and I just think is going to be a game changer for all of us.
I don't think real traction starts on that though until there's some lawsuits, until companies get fined. Because we have laws that have passed in the states about pay transparency, and we have still the majority of jobs posted in those states don't include the pay, or those that do often have this radical $400,000 plus ban.
Well, of the 49 states that have pay equality, laws, and the many that now have, I think about 21 have pay transparency laws, very few of them have a cost to doing it badly. But
so far,
but now you're starting to see that. Certainly Europe is ahead of us in relation to that.
Oh.
But now with what New York and especially California have done is they put some expenses that employers are going to find themselves having to pay if they fail to comply.
Well,
So-
until somebody gets, punched in the stomach, I just don't see it getting any the traction that it deserves.
I hear you. I agree.
I see it like in Europe, right? I hire in Europe, and we pay the same salary regardless of where you are. And we've got folks who've moved out of Ireland, and we hire in different countries using EORs, but we pay the net same amount. So obviously there's different the taxation differences on an employer in somewhere like Spain and Portugal is about 30% different to Ireland. So, we got to take that out of the total amount. So, the person in those countries gets paid about 30% less into their hands before they pay their personal tax, because the company has to assume that. So those kind of equalization things have to happen, right? It's like,
Yep.
And people forget that stuff. It's the kind of nitty gritty. And then there's benefits. If you're in the Nordics, you're going to pay more vacation time, more leave. You're going to have to build that into the cost base. So these things, Comp and Ben's folks have never been in such demand to make sure this all works. But the principle you speak of, Gerry, is so right. It's like, this is what we pay for someone to deliver this work, and that's it. Now, if you're in a very distant country and we want you to get with your team once a quarter, we're going to build in the flight costs. And again, these things get added up, and someone locally wouldn't have to pay those costs. But like, someone in Calcutta shouldn't earn so little, and someone in the Bay Area shouldn't earn so much. And that is just the reality of the world. But, if you want to live and pay crazy rents, I saw a tweet during the week. It was a staff engineer from Meta who'd been laid off and was complaining that he couldn't afford his rent. He'd bought a home for $1.5 million, and his mortgage was $8,300 a month. And I was like, what the heck?
Get a zero down. Like,
I was kind of like, oh, no sympathy. But then folks were kind of chiming in on where he lives in Seattle. That might be a 2-bed. It might not even be a 3-bed, because the property is so expensive. So like, he would have bought, I assume, bought that house and got that mortgage naively, perhaps too junior in his role, but he would have thought, staff engineers don't get laid off, right? In companies like Meta, you're all good. And hey, you have to live near the office. So therefore that's what it costs, but you could get somewhere for a couple $100. I was in Lisbon last week, right? And you can get a gorgeous 2-bed apartment overlooking the water in Lisbon for about $1,000, $1,200 a month. But you're going to earn, the national average wage is 700 euros a month. So, I think it's going to hopefully help equality, and one of many measures to try and get us there, Gerry.
I think it's fascinating.
Well, look, Johnny, we do this as we wrap up all of these. We ask all of our guests to give us the title of a book, if they were going to write a book right now about the state of things, or even just their headspace. So if we'll put you on the spot and ask you as well, exception to the question. So if you're going to write a book today, what do you title it?
Oh, you are putting me on the spot there, aren't you? I'll start with the title of a book that I read recently that I love. I'm going to twist it for my version. And that's a book called "This Is How They Tell Me the World Ends." And it was written about 2-3 years ago, in advance of the Ukraine invasion, about the cyber issues with Russia and China, and where it was going, and particularly focused on Ukraine, and how the US, China, and Russia are fighting this cyber war, and we just don't even see it, and how it's been going on for quite some time, and it's the next theater of war. And we then saw that materialize in Ukraine, and it's fascinating. You'll never look at your iPhone or your Android device ever again. But I prefer to title my book to use that. This is how they tell me the world started. And, to me, that's the world of work. I see, the pandemic was a reset. I think we're into a new phase. It's a fun, we've gone, three of us have been through different changes, right? This is the most fundamental reset I've seen in my professional career, which is maybe only 25 years long, right? Or my working career, which is 30 something years long. And I just do believe this is one of the biggest resets that we'll see in our lifetimes. And it's going to just continue to filter into different effects for decades to come. And it excites me.
I love that. So Johnny, who do you give the first signed copy of that book to?
And not us.
Well, my mother, of course.
There you go.
I love these answers.
That's great. And I do love the title because it reflects, if you will, that when we look at the future that we want to be in, we should be working hard to create the kind of world that we would like to have for ourselves. So I think it's cool.
Be the change you want to be. Something along those lines. Yeah. Johnny, thank you so much. We know you're super busy. We love when you get a chance to jump on here. I'm going to do my best not to lose this particular podcast. But before we managed to get that up there, I did full ownership of that. We had one expire. So this is the pleasure of a second of a rerun.
Even better, Chris. And listen, thank you both. I'm looking forward to seeing you both in North Carolina pretty soon.
Yeah, very, very much looking forward to that. So hang out. Don't go anywhere yet. We're going to put you in there. Much gratitude. Appreciate you being on. Gerry, really quickly, we've got a new button on here. So what we didn't call out, so the history of recruiting was done in large part by CXR Foundation. So not just all the contributors, but also there is a nonprofit that we have founded that does a lot of that work behind that program. I think recruiting recruiters. Well, actually, we had a live in-person community and charity activity that was sort of the impetus for the CXR Foundation. But then also, I think recruiters recruiting recruiters, when we did that years ago, sort of got it online, like picked it up and moved it. And this is one of those efforts. Also,
it's certainly not an easy task to take that content and find a way to put it on a platform so that people can engage with it and that we can change it in an easy way.
Yep.
And to have CXR's foundation be able to invest in being able to do that, because we basically told every one of the contributing authors, the content's yours. In effect, you're an author, so take that content, put it wherever you want. The problem with it is it resides then in a PDF file that you can't do much with. So yeah, this hopefully will help us move it in a variety of different ways.
So let's see if we've got a new button. Oh, there it goes. It's in the top, I guess. So you can scan that. We've even got this fancy button. Look at that. So if you're watching us, there's a QR code there. The CXR Foundation has a number of committees, so you can participate in that if you're interested in volunteering, not just for the history of, but we've got several things that are going on. We got a mentor program that's getting ready to launch. I'm super excited about that. That's been like 9 months. We've been cooking that. So we're pretty stoked about that and a number of other things. But if you're interested in donating, you can do that. You can scan this. You can go to cxr.foundation/donate. It is a nonprofit. Or you can scan the QR code. And then, of course, any aspect on the site is a whole bunch of request information and contact us links that the team have put up there. I want to encourage anybody that like to just take part, not just in the history of, but any other programs that we have going on. Encourage you to lean in. It feels good. It's feel good work, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, it's feel good work. All right. With that, we're going to take everybody out. We'll see everybody next week. Say goodbye, Gerry.
Goodbye.
Thanks for listening to the CXR channel. Please subscribe to CXR on your favorite podcast resource and leave us a review while you're at it. Learn more about CXR at our website, cxr.works, facebook.com and twitter.com/careercrossroads, and on Instagram @careerxroads. We'll catch you next time.